Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, children of all ages. Welcome to the AI at Work seminar this afternoon with myself, James Poulter. Everyone knows me as JP. I will be your host, your navigator and confidant through the next half an hour or so. And it's really glad to be with you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is James Poulter. I run a consultancy called 3 Point based in London. We are a global AI consultancy helping organizations of all sizes and kinds navigate the changing landscape of work when it comes to AI. So that's what I spend most of my time doing. And I've spent the past year really thinking very deeply about this, so much so that someone said I should write it down, which I did, in something called AI at Work, which is a book based on this content coming out this summer. There's some orange postcards on your tables where you can pre-order it. If you've ever come to any of the things that I've done at Missional AI before, or watched me on LinkedIn, which I assume is basically none of you, it would also really help me, though, if you do the pre-ordering thing. So that's the last thing I'm going to say about the book, apart from the next 3 times I'm going to mention it. So thank you very much. It's really good to be with you. I spend a lot of time here in the US working with different organizations of all kinds, and I get the opportunity to fly backwards and forwards from my time in London, where I live with my wife and our 2 kids, who are also wrestling with the world of AI. It is an odd time to be working, isn't it just? Yes? Are you feeling the oddness recently? I've spent most of my past month talking to a series of lobsters. Yes. The main lobster I talked to is called Jarvis because of my ongoing obsession with the Marvel universe and just the general desire to morph into Iron Man / Robert Downey Jr. I'm succeeding more on one than the other of those fronts. You can decide which one later. And I spend a lot of time talking to Jarvis. It's this bot that I built on OpenClaw that I'm sure some of you may have played around with. Anyone built an OpenClaw yet? A few of you in the room? Okay. How's it going? Yeah, miffed, generally bad. Some of you are talking to it right now, so you're not listening. That's fine. So Jarvis is the main one that I've been talking to. We also have another AI bot called Dexter, who I've been speaking to a lot. He's the one that does all the coding. Anyone watch Dexter's Laboratory when they were growing up? Yeah, kind of that Cartoon Network show. Yeah, absolutely. Right, a real throwback moment. The thing that these conversations with these little AI agents over the past month or so have really taught me is that work is about to get really weird, if it hasn't done already. Now, some of you are here with co-workers who you've worked with for many, many years, and so you know that work has been weird for some time. But I'm talking about working with these digital agents, these different types of AIs that now seem to live mostly in our phones, talking to us through things like Telegram or WhatsApp or these different chatbots. And that type of interaction really has become quite strange. For those of you who haven't been tracking so closely with what's been going on with this technology called OpenClaw, it emerged a couple of months ago from a solo developer who built it and released it as an open source project, originally under the name of Claude Bot, and it's gone through a couple of different reiterations since, as you know, because unfortunately there is such a thing as copyright lawyers, and they weren't too happy at Anthropic. And so after a while, it got renamed a couple of times. It even went so far as to find about 20,000 of these claws, all named after this kind of lobstery type character, showing up and building their own social network called Maltbook. They started their own lobsterfarianism religion, talking to each other, kind of espousing the benefits of what they might do with their human overseers. They even created another website that was a little bit like one of these recruitment sites where they are now hiring humans to do the work that the AIs can't do. So, as I say, work has gotten weird, and it's even done strange things like driven up the demand for Mac Minis. I think they're actually sold out pretty much exclusively here in Silicon Valley. I bought the last 2 of them in the Apple store on Regent Street in London last week. So, no matter what we think is going to happen in the world of work, it just keeps getting stranger. And I think that is really kind of the issue that we all have to wrestle with. Because no matter how much we like to think about AI and mission, we're here at Missional AI, and think about how it's affecting us, our home lives and parenting our kids and in our schools and various other places, most of us, at least for the broad majority, spend a lot of time at work, right? I know you do, I certainly do, often more time than I'd like to. And we all wrestle with this challenge of where does this fit into our working lives? Is there too much of it? Is there not enough? How can I get more? Some of you are all wrestling with that. And I think this strangeness, this weirdness that we're dealing with is going to get weirder. If we listen to the people that are creating the technology, they would suggest the same. Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic, this kind of very well respected figure, but also very prominent now in the discourse around AI, says in his most recent paper that soon we might see something that looks a bit like a country of geniuses in a data center. Country of geniuses in a data center. Now, personally, I've not been to many data centers, but if I went to one and there was a country of geniuses living in it, one, I think it'd probably be a bit cramped, but secondarily, it would be a bit of an odd experience. We have this intelligence that now takes a form that lives all the time, that never sleeps, that never takes vacation, that never goes home. It just keeps going. And it seems to be getting so smart that the work that we do, the work that all of us do, is not just being aided by it and supported by it. And of course, we want that, right? We want, who doesn't want to work faster, cleaner, smarter? Okay, I'm sure that's what we all want. But it's working so fast, so clean, and so smart that it might just do all of the work for us. And then the real question is, well, what am I left to do? Anthropic's own study came out last month. It's the last version of what they call the Anthropic Economic Index. And it found in it that there are a number of occupations that are more exposed to the threat of AI in their work than others. And we can take a look at what some of these are. Sorry if it's a bit small for you at the back, but when you watch this back on the slides, you'll be able to see it. It says management, business, finance, computer, and math, very highly covered by the AI exposure. Office administration, the one in that little red line that you see, is where they're already observing that AI can do this work, not just theoretically. And the one that's the most outlier is also legal services. Yes, we pray for the lawyers. Even they can come to know Jesus. There's a lot of coverage here. Work is going to get smothered in many cases by AI, whether it's writing and updating CVs in the HR field or helping you select the type of people that you're going to hire, whether it's in the financial services area where it's doing the budgeting, where it's working through the forecast. And certainly for most of us, it's the world of office administration and email. And these models are getting so smart that they are exposing things that many of us have just taken for granted. This past week, Anthropic launched something in preview mode called Claude Mythos. Claude Mythos is the next generation of models that are going to succeed the Opus models from Anthropic. They expect these are, in some order of magnitude, about 100x more powerful than Opus 4.6 is today. So powerful that they've actually decided not to leave it fully out there in the public. You might have seen this released this week, because it is exposed over 40 different major cybersecurity vulnerabilities in almost every major browser window that we use the internet through today. Vulnerabilities that have been present there for months. And if the AI can decrypt what's going on in cybersecurity, then the users of that AI could obviously use it to penetrate almost any system. A country of geniuses living in a data center. Sounds far-fetched, but maybe very close. So what are we doing about it? Well, what we seem to see is that all of you are already using it. And not just all of you. I mean, you guys are outliers. If you didn't know, you are at a Christian AI conference in Silicon Valley, right? If you didn't feel that yourself was maybe kind of in the 1%, then you are very much so. Like, this is not normal. For most people, this is not normal to be spending 3 days out of your normal working week doing nothing but thinking about the future of AI. But most people, their experience is they are using this technology. At my previous firm, House 337, we did an annual study looking at the impact of AI into people's daily lives. And we found this, that in about 60% of all cases where people are using AI, they're using tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and for the ones that really feel bad for themselves, using Copilot. And it's all right. We can pray for them later. But in all cases, this represents around about 70% of all demographics. That's in age, gender, background, technological literacy. 70% of people have had some exposure in the past month of using some kind of AI tool, right? Now, you might say, well, that maybe isn't that surprising. These things have gotten a lot of press. They're very available. They're almost always free to use at the point of access. Of course, lots of people have played with them. But what's interesting is that when you begin to dive into what's happening in the workplace, is that there is an ungoverned and maybe ungovernable expansion of the use of this technology. And so we dug further in to look into what are people actually doing when it comes to using AI at work. And what we found is that in almost all cases, particularly workers who spend any time doing their work on a computer, they are using it for a whole myriad of different tasks. And some, but not the majority, have had some level of training on the tools. As it says here in that fourth bar down, about 41% of people who have been given AI have had some kind of training. When we dig into it, though, what we find is that what most people's training is that they were given access to a tool, and then someone ran a lunch and learn session on how to prompt. And that was about where it ended. Has anyone experienced this? Okay. What's maybe more concerning is that only 32% of the companies that have rolled out these tools have written any form of formal policy or guidelines on how to use the tools, and only 37% had a list of approved tools. Quite frankly, it is that we cannot keep up with governing this stuff inside of the workplace. That is the experience. But yet, at work, people are using it, and they are using it expansively. Harvard do an annual time use study looking at the impact of AI and how people are using it. On the left-hand side of this graph, it shows you the top use cases for how people are using AI between 2024 and 2025 in their personal lives. And the top box has risen to therapy and companionship being the most used use case in their personal lives. Now, that's concerning in and of itself, and we can talk about that another time. But in the work world, it's something similar kind of going on, just the professionalized version of it, which is that personal and professional support, and that is a very wide-ranging set of use cases, has also risen to be the top thing that people do with AI at work, outstripping things like content creation, technical assistance, and even learning and education. People are using these tools to get work done, or in many cases, to help them feel better about the work they're already doing, and maybe the little bit of existential crisis along the way. Why is this happening? Well, because in very quick succession, we have moved very fast away from this more traditional idea of conversational artificial intelligence. If you were to come to this conference 4 or 5 years ago, before the GPT moment, we would have been talking about conversational AI. My past 10 years of work experience has been working in and around that space, originally by leading emerging technology at the Lego Group, and then later building an agency that built some of the largest Alexa skills in the world with Amazon. And most of our experience there was building what we would call conversational AI, this left-hand side of the graph, which are human-like systems that when we talk to them, we still go and do the work. Right? You talk to ChatGPT or you talk to Claude or Gemini in the early days, you talk to it, and then you go and do the work. But of course, we know that we're very quickly moving into this middle section, the agentic work, right? And the agentic work, the experience of agentic work, is that we talk to the AI system and it goes and does the work for us. We've moved away from these things being answer boxes and question engines into being task operators, things that can do the work for us. And when we do that, the dynamic of what work looks like changes. And very fast, increasingly fast, it looks like we might soon head into what we would call AI innovators, or maybe full AI organizations. Tools like Paperclip that announced last month, that I don't know if anyone's played around with yet, that is advertised as a tool for deploying AI agents into zero human employee companies. It's estimated by Andreessen Horowitz, the creators of A16Z, the VC firm here in the Valley, that at some point, probably by 2030, we will see the emergence of the first company in the world to have $1 billion of revenue with one employee. And I'd like that to be mine. And I'd like you all to be customers, or investors, maybe. That'd be lovely. So if that is the direction of travel, if that's where we're heading, how are we going to get there? Well, I think one of the ways we're going to get there is probably something that you've all begun to experience, which is this concept of vibe coding, right? How many of you have vibe coded something recently? Okay, a few, but not all, right? We know what vibe coding is, right? It's the most like Gen Z way of doing work ever described. It's giving into the model, giving into the vibes, hoping for the best. It comes from this phrase from Andrej Karpathy, one of the founders at Anthropic. He talks about this idea of just giving into the vibe of the model. And what that giving in looks like ultimately is that rather than us writing code, it is us giving over that power to someone else and us just being more, a little bit like the steering wheel in the car, right? cars have gone through this evolutionary process as well, right? We went from manual stick shift in my country, we still drive some of them, but not very many these days, to automatic, to ABS, to self-driving now, and ultimately autonomous cars. I got in my first Waymo yesterday. It was a very out-of-body experience. It was weird. But, we've let that kind of happen, right, in the car sector. And I think the same thing is basically happening to work, which is that gradually we're getting further and further abstracted away from the doing of the task to being more like the guider of the task, and ultimately to maybe just the overseer of the direction. You're still putting into the app where you want to go, but generally speaking, you're not going to have an awful lot to do with how you get there. And that's happening in the world of coding. But what's interesting is that when we think about all other forms of knowledge work, we're beginning to see that that's spilling out of the coding tasks into basically all other ways of working. And I would expand this term into thinking about the idea of like vibe working. Claude Code, the tool that I'm sure many of you have spent a lot of time getting intimately familiar with in recent months, was the thing that was used to build Claude Coworker, the new instance inside of the Claude app, where it can manipulate your desktop, manage files for you, organize things, connect to all of your other services. Built in about a month, when 95% of all of the code for Claude Coworker was written by Claude Code. Right? So we see that this work pattern is emerging because these tools are able to manipulate software better than you can. And that shouldn't be a surprise. I've had Excel on my desktop for 3 decades. I do not know how to do a pivot table, and I have no desire to learn. And I think in this world, I may never have to, and that's a real joy to me. Right? But of course, the reality is that this has always been the case. We all have software on our desktops. We all have access to the internet. Do we use more than 5% of the capability that we have? Probably not. Most people don't. And maybe you do because you came for 3 days to Silicon Valley to come to an AI conference. Like that was what you thought like leisure time looked like. And that's fine. We're glad you're here. But so maybe you're the outlier. But for most of your friends and colleagues, the people that you work with every day, and certainly the people that don't spend most of their time in this city or space, their experience is that they use less than 5% of the capability of the tools that they've had for 3 decades or in their phone, and certainly not the way that they use AI the way that you use AI. And that seems to be the normality. And so it seems very obvious to me that all software soon will become vibe working software because it just makes much more sense. Because whether you're editing video or creating images or doing research or creating PowerPoint presentations or doing project management work, all of these tools and everyone in between are adding chatbots and assistants and agents into them because the agents and AIs know how to manipulate this software better than you do. And why do they know how to do that? Well, because they were grown from the code that has written the software in the first place. Of course they know how to use it better than you do. I mean, it brings up all sorts of questions about what the future of the internet really looks like anyway, right? I mean, in a world where all AI is doing the work, what do websites look like? I mean, it's a kind of hard thing to materialize. Even what do applications look like at this point? Is it all just going to be a conversation in Telegram and assets being sent to you? Possibly. But whatever that looks like, we're seeing that this new agentic way of working is beginning to emerge. And it's the way that I found myself beginning to work. I founded 3Point at the start of this year, and I basically haven't even had time to properly launch it. I'm kind of like hard launching it like a relationship on Instagram into you like right now. Because I found that I'm basically doing about the equivalent output when I had 5 full-time employees in my last company on my own with AI. And that's not a humble brag. That's just to tell you the sheer reality of, like, I don't have a project manager, a slide designer, or a finance person or an assistant doing this work anymore. Those are the people I would have had 7 years ago when we started the last company. Today, it's just me and like 2 Mac Minis and like an ailing VPS that's like trying to keep up. Like, it's just the way it is. And it's these tools that are surrounded on those systems that are helping me get that work done. And so this idea of vibe working, I think, is something that is going to become the emergent way of doing most knowledge work. And I think it's happening quicker than we might like to reckon with. Now, to do this well, and I'm assuming that some of you might be already on this journey, and maybe we'll just do a quick show of how many of you feel like you're already working this way? A few, okay, but not the majority. There's a few things that I've observed, and I just thought that for the sake of this session, I would just share with you what I've learned so far in doing this, and maybe you can step into it as well. That there is this interesting loop that happens when we work this way, and it's this kind of agent loop. And it's built through 3 kind of core components. The first is the brain. What brain are you going to plumb this thing into? For many of you, you have spent a lot of time in the archaic knowledge-sharing file systems of your employer. And I'm very sorry for you, and we will create some kind of support group, maybe in the evening session. That would be maybe like SharePoint Anonymous, perhaps. And you know what the experience of this is like, right? Because you've all got, kind of PowerPoint presentation X _ version 2 edits on your desktop somewhere. And so you're surprised, and certainly those that are maybe less like AI pilled than we are surprised that AI can't work out where everything is. Well, funnily enough, it can't work out where everything is because, well, you didn't do a particularly good job of organizing it in the first place. And so the first thing I've learned is that we have seen why so many of these early generative AI projects have failed. A study from Forbes that was maybe over-popularized at the end of last year said that 95% of all generative AI experiments in the enterprise have failed. And I think the reason for that is that most people, at the early kind of dawn of 2023, in the wake of the first ChatGPT wave, basically went and bought some kind of subscription, some kind of license to ChatGPT or Gemini, and then hoped for the best. And no one did the work of actually organizing the brain, organizing the information inside of your system. And so that is the first place to start, is that if you haven't done the hard work of building a better brain, then now's the place to do it. Now, this might be organizing your files, whether it's in Google Drive or in SharePoint, but increasingly we know that these AI systems, they run on tokens, they process an awful lot of data and information, and just handing them unstructured PDFs and PowerPoint documents is a very hungry exercise, and I don't recommend it. But what we can do is use these other AI systems, and particularly things like Claude Coworker, to do the job for you. Basically, what I've been doing is processing every document that I've been working with and asking Claude to write markdown summaries of that file, and have that markdown file then stored either in Notion or Obsidian. These are two tools. Notion is obviously a paid subscription. Obsidian starts off for free. And by then having Claude Code or OpenClaw reference these markdown files, you can build the knowledge hub that the agent needs very, very quickly without having to process massive amounts of data. And so the simple way of doing this is getting all of those files organized, maybe have Claude Coworker do it, and then have it exposed and look at Notion or Obsidian instead. So once we have the brain, then the next thing is, okay, well, where is it going to kind of do the processing? And that's in what we might now begin to see popularized as the term of agent harness. Has anyone heard this phrase yet? Agent harness. It's amazing how quickly these things become popularized. It's not a particularly attractive term, is it? Like, well, how's your harness doing? Not great. But anyway, the agent harness. And so in this case, Claude, or Claude Code in particular, is an agent harness, right? Claude Code is not the model itself. It's not the thing that's powering it. It's just a way of hanging onto the model and the context and everything else that's going on. And OpenClaw or other systems like it are similar agent harnesses. And you need to pick some kind of agent harness to work with. And so that might be Claude Code, it might be OpenClaw or one of the others. And then finally, you need to give the agent harness not only the brain, but also the hands and the feet, the things that it can take and use and do, the limbs, right, the digits and dextile things that it can use to actually get stuff done. And so this is where MCP servers or API hooks come in, whether that's things like HeyGen for creating video, whether it's using Nano Banana for images, or 11 Labs for audio, or whichever model you choose to do. But this loop is where things get faster and faster, because the self-improvement, when you begin to connect these things together, begins to enable this agentic way of working. And I think this vibe working has some other interesting nuances to kind of deal with. One is that prompts, generally speaking, written by most people are bad. Because most of you write prompts the way that you either ask a friend for work or you write things down the way that you used to Google things. And this is our experience. And I think probably for most of you, if you came to this room, you're better than the average at prompting because you came to this. But if your friends, your colleagues, and people that you're going to go back to struggle with this, then one of the big things is to give them this very simple tool, which is this. Please improve this prompt. Very simple phrase. Please improve this prompt. We do it all the time. Now, increasingly, these models are getting better at doing that for themselves, but one of the big things you can ask is the model to do that. The second I found way of working is the idea of reverse prompting, which is that many times what we are trying to get done, we actually don't know how to get it done, but the model does. And so by asking the AI model, hey, can you ask me questions about how to get this thing done, you can reveal more information to the model than you might have done so just by offering up yourself. And so one of the big steps is that when we start new tasks, and particularly if we're mapping a new process, have the AI model ask you how you do the work. Because the skill that most people have not yet perfected is describing what they actually do at work every day. I'll say that again. Most people don't know what they do at work every day. Okay? On an average, where are we? I have no idea what time it is, by the way, because my brain is still currently in London. But yeah, it's in the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday. Greg, is it in the first row? What are you usually doing at 3 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon?
Answering emails.
Answering emails. Which emails?
All of them.
To who?
My boss, my staff.
Okay, so if I just go and say to the agent, hey, can you spend the next hour answering all my emails to my boss? Would you feel comfortable with that? No, I didn't think so. The reason being is because you know way more about how you answer the emails, which emails to answer, which ones not to answer, which drafts to write, which calendars you actually really want to go to, and which ones your wife has just told you have to be there for. Like, it happens, right? And so we need to give this information, but we don't naturally give it up, because the way that most of you do the work that you do every day is up here. You never wrote it down, no one ever asked you, you just learned how to do it. For those of you that have been in organizations for, let's say, longer than 5 years, right, a few of you, right, you will soon become what is known as the oracle, right, the oracle problem, right? Everybody, oh, I don't know how that gets done, Greg does it, right? Like, that's how that works, right? We all have one. And this is how we get work done most of the time. In most organizations, this is the way it works. And so actually, if you want people in your teams to get better at working with AIs, describing what the work they do every day is the essential job. Because if you can't describe it, the AI can't necessarily do it. Or it certainly could do a version of it. It's just going to be very bad. And it's going to hallucinate a whole bunch to fill in the gaps of the things you never told it. So reverse prompting is one of the challenges. That's when we expand the context. The other problem is that we get compaction. The longer you talk to these models, as you know, they try and hold on to more and more and more context. And so one of the big things we have to get into the rhythm of is repeatedly refreshing them, kind of the same way that you would move meeting to meeting through the day, right? When you finish the meeting, right, with your friends and colleagues, what do? You get up, you go get a cup of coffee, you kind of process for a minute, you maybe walk out and read the notes, you go to the next meeting, and you start over again with fresh context. This is the exact same process we have to do with these AIs, because at the moment, whilst they feel like talking to a thing that can remember everything, the reality is that that's just not true. That if you talk to them for too long, you need to refresh the context, or you need to compact it down, give it a summary to work with. And this same process of asking these AIs to summarize your work is a big part of that. And managing context is actually, I think, becoming maybe the most human part of the job in this way of vibe working. Managing which information is important to remember at any one time and only giving exposure to these different agents to do so. And you might be seeing on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram videos of people, kind of like blasing, saying, yeah, I've got like 50 agents and like I've got 25 sub-agents and like they're all like vibing together in this room and they're having a great time. And like, yeah, they just like raised me like 5 billion in my Series A and I'm doing like this agentically VC-enabled augmented reality like Mindstorms thing. Anyway, whatever it might be. We're in Silicon Valley, it's a weird place. But what I'm saying is that you might be seeing that. It's like, well, why do they need 50 agents and 25 sub-agents? Well, it's because those are 25 different bits of context, right? Managing this context down into different agents to do the work is how we manage this context. So these are the things that we're beginning to observe. One of the things that's the upstream impact of all of this is into the human part of the workforce. We're seeing that there is an increasingly growing talent gap between those that are leaning heavily into this world and those that are saying, I'd like to stay on the outside. The conscientious objectors, those that say, no, this is not for me. And I am not here to tell you to go and tell them to become that person, right? Like, that's fine if they want to do so. But the reality is we're already beginning to see that there are fewer and fewer specialized roles being required inside of organizations because AI is a better specialist than anybody is, right? No matter how specialized you are in your field, AI has read more details, remembered more of it, and can recall more of it than you ever will do, and we're already beginning to see that. We're also beginning to see that in teams where AI is being given to them, that they are outperforming the performance of an individual, they're outperforming the performance of a team that doesn't have AI, and where the teams have been given the AI, they are performing in the top 10 percentile of the teams that don't have access to it. So the idea that this isn't having an impact on people when they get access to it is for the birds. This is already happening. And the big impact of that is that the work that we do and the organizational structures that we live and work in are going to change. Very quickly, we are beginning to see that AI agents are taking over the most junior work, right? That humans and AIs will become the new management layer as they work together. And that leadership, at least for now, seems to still be the purview and opportunity for the most senior leaders. But you have to ask the question, well, what does that mean for those that are coming up behind us? And I think let's be honest, that the next 10 years is going to be pretty rough for those that are just joining the workforce, unless we do something about it. Unless we reckon with the fact that the first 5 years of work need to change. That we need to design new ways of apprenticing people into organizations. Over the past decade or two, we have basically given college as an option for people to go and be looked after in the early years of formation, and they pay for it. Or in my country, the state has paid for it, or debt has paid for it. But industry has not paid for it. Whereas in blue-collar work, since the time of Jesus, we have been apprenticing people into professions from the get-go, right? You know this also in like healthcare and nursing, right? Like show one, teach one, do one, like that methodology. But in knowledge work, we have not done this, right? We have taken what I call the bottom stack of the work and hived it off, and the most repetitive stuff we give to the junior people, and they can also make the coffee if they're lucky, right? Whilst the midweight and the senior people get to do the more interesting things. That's not an opportunity for anybody. We need to redesign what that work stack looks like. We need to give them the opportunity to become what I call full stack professionals. People that get to do all parts of the work stack, the leadership, the empathy, the strategy work, and yes, of course, the AI orchestration. They should be able to get to do all parts of it from the beginning because they've got safe places to do it now. They can do it in simulated environments. They can do it talking to these AI agents. They can learn from them and steward them, but we have to give them these opportunities. And we as organizations, and if you're an employer in the room, need to take on some of that burden, because if we don't, then what's the alternative? Either an awful lot of people with not a lot to do, and that seems like a very dangerous thing, or a lot of people whose purpose and identity is being supported by universal basic income and subsidization. And I don't think either of those are examples of what God gave for us when he created us to be creators and creative. So we need to redesign this stack, and we need to give them opportunities to do so. And if you would like to learn how to do that, then I have a book exactly about this topic. I'm in America, so apparently it's okay to sell stuff, so that's fine. We're out of time, but I would love to take some questions from you if we do, because we've got a little bit of a gap before the next thing, and I'll be stood here wearing exactly this outfit if you would like to come and see me to do that. But for now, I'm going to say thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of Missional AI. I will see you back here this afternoon for the final keynote of the day. Thanks so much.